Hi, this is a video that talks a little bit about the Eastern Shore Milky Way case study. I know several of you have questions about this. I want to point out that this case study is easy and relevant, so please resist the urge to just throw up your hands. Once you get into it and understand it, it's very simple to do, and I think you'll see with a realistic problem how management accounting works. The structure of the case study is worth a minute of discussion because that's one of the things that usually isn't clear to people at first. So there are two types of documents. In total, there are 5 documents that relate to the case study. First, there's a Word document that describes it. It describes both the background of the company that you're going to be doing the case study for, and it describes what the outcome should be for the case study. You're going to use the Word document and the facts in it to do 4 Blackboard quizzes. Basically, I've structured each of the 4 Blackboard quizzes so that you answer the types of questions about the case study that I want you to answer. So, several semesters ago, the case study was something that you would write freehand as a Word document. You'd do some calculations, you might have Excel spreadsheets. To try to make it easier, I've actually asked you the questions that I want you to answer right on a Blackboard quiz. So if you've ever had Blackboard tests or quizzes, and you'll have them in this class, you're actually going to have 2 exams that are Blackboard exams. But if you have these, you'll notice that you can either have multiple choice questions, fill in the blank questions, or sort of open-ended essay questions. These 4 Blackboard quizzes have at least one of each of those types of questions. Now, what I want to point out is what's different from these Blackboard quizzes as opposed to the exams is that you can do these over and over again until you're satisfied with your answer or until the due date passes. Whereas on the Blackboard test, the 2 exams that I give, you only have 1 shot. Notice that these 4 Blackboard quizzes are in Learning Unit 2, covering Chapter 14, Learning Unit 3, covering Chapter 15, Learning Unit 4, covering Chapter 18, and I think the last one's Learning Unit 6, covering Chapter 21. So the case study doesn't cover all of the chapters, it only covers some of them. Let's talk a little bit about the type of business you're going to be looking at. So this is a vacation business that sells visits to the moon. What's interesting here is I want you to see nobody is quite doing this, but real companies are coming up with a model similar to this one. If you've heard of SpaceX run by Elon Musk, or you've heard of Virgin Galactic run by Richard Branson, these companies are precisely trying to do space vacations right now. So this company, in a near future hypothetical world, has beat those 2, and it's actually doing a vacation. So the company is called Eastern Shore Milky Way Company because it operates out of Wallops Island on the eastern shore of Virginia. That's about 2 hours away from Portsmouth. If you're not aware of that, I've actually taken groups of students there for tours, and so it's just about 2 hours. You can easily do it as a day trip. The visit to the moon takes about 2 weeks. Much as we already know from science, the basic trip to the moon takes about 3 days. You get there, and you'd come back. So the rest of the time, the roughly 8 days, you spend hanging around the moon. But be careful and listen carefully, because this is not something where you would have Holiday Inns or Hyatts sitting right on the ground in big, magnificent architectural structure. So each passenger takes 1 ship, a sort of large, fast ship, to and from the moon. And that's an expensive ship, as you'll see. These vacationers, these passengers, and only 10 of them can fit on the big ship, stay at a hotel that orbits the moon. So listen carefully to that. The ship, the hotel orbits the moon. So think International Space Station, That's what I mean by ISS. Think about something that sort of orbits the station, orbits the moon, and is inflatable. Notice that I tell you the hotel is made of 9 inflatable modules, a dining room is one of the modules, an observatory is one of the modules, along with the game room. A gym is one of the modules, and there's 6 sleeping modules. And so with 10 passengers, that means depending on the type of room you pay for, you might have a private one or you might share. If you're going as a couple, you might share with the other member of your couple. Let me talk for just a minute about the types of assets this business has then. So the business owns 2 spaceships. It doesn't make anything. It has a large ship for going to the moon itself, and it has a smaller ship that couldn't go the whole way to and from the moon to Earth. All it does is go from the space station or the hotel that orbits the moon down to the moon so people can go down there for several hours. They don't stay there, just like if you picture old video of Neil Armstrong and other astronauts. If you're going to go to the moon, you still need a special suit, and it's rather uncomfortable. So these people would go down to the moon for several hours, walk around, and then come back. I want to point out that this vacation is viable, even though it's not what you'd think of as a fun vacation. Many people who do vacations, like let's say climb Mount Everest or go on exotic safari hunts in Africa, go for the thrill or the excitement of accomplishing something. I can assure you Mount Everest is not a matter of sitting at the Holiday Inn, enjoying the hot tub and swimming once in a while. There's not, a hotel up there on the top. So this type of vacation is for the thrill seeker. So for the foreseeable future, the sleeping modules and the game room and the cafeteria are going to be meager, like you see the astronauts use. They're not going to be vacation paradises. And yet, as you'll see when you get around to pricing the ship and pricing the visit, I should say pricing the visit, not pricing the ship, you'll see it's quite pricey. Well, let's now then look at excerpts from both the case study document, the Word document, as well as at least the first Blackboard quiz. So when you click on the Blackboard Word document, when you click on the Word document for Eastern Shore Milky Way, this will be the cover page. This is another page, and it describes some facts about the case study. Now, I'm not going to read this to you, and indeed I don't have all the pages in there. But basically what I want to show you is you read through this, there's some facts in here, and you can see toward the bottom of the page that requirement 1 is going to be due really in a little over a week from now, to June 18th. That requirement is 9 multiple choice questions, 1 fill in the blank, and 1 essay question, which again you can do over and over again. One of the things that might help you, I've left it here. This is a grid I've created back for when we used to do the case study and just turn it in. So you don't have to do this. This isn't required. You don't have to turn this in. But if you do check off whether each of these items is a fixed or variable cost and whether it's a direct or indirect cost, it'll help you to think about management accounting, and indeed it may help you with the multiple choice question. Now, as an example, I'm going to show you how doing number 1 will help you with question number 1 on the Blackboard quiz. So it says, the purchase of an ES C-2000 spaceship, that's the big ship, $4 billion. Well, you're hoping this ship is going to last longer than 1 year. In fact, I'm suggesting that you plan to have it last 10 years. And you're going to see there's a fill-in-the-blank question on this Blackboard quiz where it asks you how many years you think this will last. And I'd suggest you say 10. So if you divide 4 billion by 10, the annual cost is 400 million. Still very pricey. So when we think about variable cost and fixed cost, these are things you'll run into in your reading and in your Learn Smart activity you do. But basically we're going to say variable costs change based on how many units are produced. So for example, if we can't fill the ship, that's our production, is how many passengers we take, how many seats we sell. So if we can't sell all 10, if we only sell 7, then if our cost would be lower because we sold 7, we would say that's a variable cost. It varies with production. But as is the case with this spaceship, the cost is the same. So if we have less people going on the trip, we have to spread the cost of the ship among fewer people. It means it's higher per person. So we're going to say it's a fixed cost. The spaceship, we would say, is an indirect cost, meaning you can't trace it to any one passenger. You know, something like the food, which we're going to talk about later. You could figure out which passenger ate which bit of food. So you'd say that's a direct cost, but this spaceship is an indirect. So if I were checking this off, I'd check the spaceship off as fixed and indirect. Well, here's a real quick rundown on the other requirements. And again, because this is an overview, I'm not really going to spend time dealing with these questions now. Requirement 2 is due 1 week later on June 25th. One thing I want to point out here, and I'm going to point it out later, is when you look at the Blackboard quiz for requirement 2, I'm going to ask you about overhead. And that's a big number. That number should be about $10 million to give you some idea. So if you come up with overhead in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you've done something wrong. If you come up with $100 million, you've probably done something wrong. Again, think about that number being about 10 million. Requirement 3 due July 2nd will actually ask you some questions about how much we should charge each traveler. And indeed, that's one of the things we're doing in management accounting, is trying to figure out how much to charge each one. Requirement 4, we're going to be thinking about a flexible budget and how to prepare one for this company. Here's a page that shows you an excerpt of a flexible budget. From the case study, you would need to fill in the question marks, and then the Blackboard quiz, you'll actually answer some questions about them. This is an excerpt from your case study that just shows you how the module looks. Most of these figures are realistic. In the case of the Space Hotel, a company called Bigelow offers these now. So you could rent 9 of them, and that quote I got, $1.35 billion for 9 of them, is an actual quote from Bigelow. Well, here's the way the Blackboard quiz looks. I don't have all 10 questions on this, but I do have just a few as a sample. So here are the first 4. I'm going to show you how you would answer question 1 here. So it's a multiple choice question. I'm carrying the video up. And the question, I don't know if you can read it or not, it's rather small, but it's about as big as I can make it. Says, what type of cost is the purchase of the ES-C-2000 spaceship for $4 billion? Well, we just talked about this. Based on these choices, it's a fixed cost. So I've X'd it out here. Indeed, you would pick this. You would click on it and then save it and later submit it as the right answer. But I said the last 2 questions are short answers. The first one's fill in the blanks. I don't have a picture of that here, but basically there's a bunch of blanks asking you how long the hotel will last, how long the ship will last, how long the smaller ship will last, how long you think the electronic devices will last, and so on. And you have to put numbers in there. One thing I want to point out, kind of a hint to you, is that I've told you that the spaceship, I've told you that the hotel is a rent charge for 1 year. That means you can't allocate it over several years. You have to pay the $1.35 billion every year. Here's an example. I'm going to shorten this way down. This is how the one essay type question in this chapter might look. So here, I know this is getting hard to read, but I want you to see my answer, which you can actually just type right in the Blackboard quiz. It says, basically, I'm not going to read this whole question, but it basically says you have several costs here. You've already considered some. This question asks you to consider some more. How would you use them to price? And you're supposed to put that in essay form, but you don't need to have a price. I don't need a final price. So what I've written here are 5 sentences that talk about how I handled the maintenance costs, where I divide them by the number of travelers, comes out to 320,000, multiply it by a profit, and that's key. We're not going to charge our cost to passengers. We're going to mark it up for a profit. There are costs that if we don't price them among the travelers, then we have to pay for them ourselves, and we actually lose money. Also, the owner, Connor in this case, wants a profit. He wouldn't be in this business to make no profit at all. You can go through the next several, and then I say at the end, as long as you've added up a profit percentage each time, as long as you've multiplied the cost by a profit percentage, you can just add these up. At the end, you'll come to a total number. You'll have to add up the other costs in the case study. And if you multiply them by a profit percentage, the grand total would be the price. And I've got a hint for you down here at the bottom. I don't know how well you can read that, but the hint, it goes back to what I was telling you earlier about overhead. If overhead's going to come out between $10 and $12 million, and it will, the price that you're going to charge travelers, I'm saying could be as low as 10 and as high as 15, but do remember, if it's as low as 10, your overhead's actually a little bit lower. If you actually get to an overhead number of 10, then the price should be a little higher. Well, we spent some time at this, so even though I'm sure there's more I could say, I'm going to break it here and certainly wait to hear any questions you might have about how to do the case study. Take care and good luck.